My message today is about resilience in nature. I'm going to start with a confession. I feel embarrassed. I hate to admit it, but I used to really dislike dandelions. I thought they were okay in other people's gardens, but not in my own, not on my lawn. And I had periods of my life, some of them rather recently, when I would try to weed them out of my garden. They couldn't be mowed down by the lawnmower, and those of you who have tried that know that that's a futile exercise, thanks to the dandelion and its resilience. Dandelions are extremely adaptive to that kind of attack. They simply come back in a flatter form, hugging the ground with flattened leaves and flowers that barely have a stem right down there by the ground. They are very resilient. The lawnmower goes right over them. But as I learned more about dandelions, I stopped trying to get rid of them. Reading about them, I found out how critical they are for biodiversity. They provide the early season nectar for pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths. And my environmentalist friends around me used to tell me, don't get rid of those dandelions, don't you know that they are critical for pollinators in the early spring? And I used to say, yeah. But now I think, yes, I know. And I'll leave them alone. Dandelions provide food for birds, especially finches and sparrows, and also for rabbits and deer. They give shelter to beneficial insects like ladybugs. They have incredibly deep taproots, and this is a warning for those of you who try to use a knife and try to get the taproot out of the ground. That's futile. The taproots can go down as far as 15 feet. And that is an incredibly important thing for the environment. It means that they aerate the soil and they bring up nutrients from deep below the surface to enrich the soil. Every part of the dandelion is edible. You may have had dandelion salads. The early leaves are the best for that. And also they haven't been touched by the dogs that walk around in your garden. And the flowers are good for dandelion wine. I made that once when I had hundreds of them. It wasn't really as dry as I like my wine to be. But you can also put them in veggie dishes, all kinds of foods. They're high in essential vitamins. And there is more. Blowing on the dandelion seeds in the wind makes your wishes come true. Really? Yes. And this custom goes back to the ancient Celts, and they may have known how vital this plant is to the environment, and they helped spread it. So the first dandelion that I see that has gone to seeds, I'm going to blow on it. Not in my own garden, I don't have a garden anymore, but I'll blow on it around my apartment building and hope that it continues to do its good work. There are many plants that provide shared care to one another. You may have heard of the three sisters of indigenous agriculture: corn, beans, and squash. The beans can grow up on the stalks of the corn at the right time of the year. And then the whole thing provides shade to the squashes that are closer to the ground and that need the sun gradually and later on. What they are doing, these three plants, is they practice mutual aid and they practice reciprocity. One helps the other. Some plants actually transform to create a mini ecosystem, or sometimes larger ones, but today I'm focusing on those very small ecosystems. A group of plants, animals, the whole thing together that provide a sustained living for all of them, a mutual aid for all of them. You may have had ecosystems like that in the years, I know I've done that at one stage, the years when we built terrariums. Is anybody here still engaged in having a terrarium? If you do it just right, with the right plants, right moisture, the right nutrients, they provide their own nutrients after a while. You can just leave it alone and it will sustain itself. And much in nature out there is like a terrarium. A rotting tree stump provides what would be best described as a soft sponge that provides moisture and nutrients to critters and many new plants like mosses, ferns, even new trees. It attracts birds and other animals. It becomes a neighborhood out in nature. There's a photo of this kind of tree stump in last week's newsletter. And I took that photo when I was on a hike. I was just fascinated by the diversity of life that was provided by that tree stump. So I spent a long time being around it and looking at it up close until I realized that I had many miles to go until supper. And then I tore myself away from it, and I just made sure to have a photo on my iPhone. And some of you have seen it in the newsletter. So that's a neighborhood. There are many neighborhoods in nature. The mangroves provide shelter to many species that eventually fertilize the soggy soil that they grow in. They are resilient to rising water levels because they simply become taller. They adapt. They store carbon, which is very important. And they support the wetlands, which is more important than some people realize. And mangroves are so essential to environmental stability that they have been called superhero ecosystems. There's a book that was written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I know that several of you have read that. And it has some pages that are devoted to the ways in which different kinds of plants support one another so that they all can thrive. This book is titled Braiding Sweetgrass. Have you read that? Yeah. And the subtitle is very important. It is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. Plants do teaching. This was written in 2013, and it's great to think of plants teaching us, humans who think they know everything. Well, I used to think I knew everything, but no longer. The dandelions have taught me a lot. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Potawatomi botanist, author, poet, environmentalist, mother, teacher, and more. When she was a young student, Robin Wall Kimmerer had to meet with her advisor, like we have to do when we're college students. And the advisor asked her why she wanted to study botany. Those were the times when a lot of women were encouraged to study something like, it used to be called home economics, and then environmental studies. That was a little more encompassing, but her advisor was a little prejudiced against her wanting to study botany. So he or she asked why. And Robin said she wanted to know why the purple asters and the yellow goldenrod tend to grow together. At this point, the advisor was rolling their eyes and said, "That kind of topic is not botany. Maybe you should look into another major, like art." But she knew she was on to something. And indeed, purple and yellow are on the opposite side of the spectrum. And that kind of togetherness of colors attracts our eyes. When you drive around and you see that combination, you go, "Ah, it's wonderful." It attracts us, and it attracts the eyes of bees and the work that they do. More bees means more pollination for both asters and goldenrod. They are better together. And there's a lot of this in nature, being better together. And what Robin was thinking about has since been established by scientific studies. Color opposites attract more bees. You can actually study this, gather data, make a control group where they're separate and then a group where they're growing together, and you will find that more pollination happens where they are together, even if it's the same number of plants overall. This kind of assistance in pollination, Robin Kimmerer explains, helps to expand knowledge everywhere. It's not just plants. It's not just for botanists. It's also for humans. The combination of scientific data with traditional indigenous knowledges gives us a more complete understanding of the natural world and of the human world. And the knowledge we gather in that way helps humans to become more resilient, like things in nature are resilient. There's a more recent book that was just published a little over a year ago. It's called The Resilience Myth. It was written by Soraya Kemali and published in 2024. And what this book does is to debunk the idea that having grit, being tough, going it alone against all odds, that these are typical characteristics of resilience. Not so, she argues. Here is part of the book's description, and I quote this. Our mainstream vision of resilience encourages us to ignore, to minimize, and even to punish the desire for our greatest resilience assets to come forth in us. Interdependence, collective versatility, and shared care. Instead of revealing our relationships to one another, our environments, and the systems that we live in, this mainstream vision highlights and glorifies self-sufficiency, limitless positivity, and individual strength against all odds. But that makes us less resilient, not more. So there is a more nature-based vision, a new paradigm, if you will, a new paradigm of resilience. And that paradigm, that vision, emphasizes helping, caring for one another and for the earth, and fostering, nurturing relationships. This is what you could call a new ethic of resilience. It's an ethic that's consistent with a feminist ethic and also with, and this is yet another title of another book, with an ethic that Sharon Welch has explored. She has a book called A Feminist Ethic of Risk. It was assigned reading when I was in seminary and she was the teacher there. And I had the hardest time understanding the book. It was very complicated until I finally understood that what she meant by a feminist ethic of risk, or an ethic of risk in general, is that our moral actions, our actions in general, that tie in with an ethic, they cannot be expected to immediately improve and get us closer to the fulfillment of that ethic. Sometimes we have to do preparatory work. And that preparatory work might take a while. And that's why it's a risk. It's a risk we have to take. So I can finally summarize her book in one sentence. Thank you, Sharon. So this new paradigm, Soraya Kamali explains, is central to the resilience that is required for all of us to live in what she aptly calls this time, a time of polycrises that are happening, many of them unexpected. It is time also to think of our resilience ethic as an ethic of risk. So may we become more resilient by practicing all these things: shared caring, mutualism, collective versatility, and many more of these things that the plants know how to do, and animals as well. May we learn from nature's ecosystems, in particular the seemingly simple, small, mini ecosystems. They require simple things to work. Simple interactions with one another, like providing shade. Interactions that help us maintain our physical and mental well-being and help us embody resilience. And may it be so. Let's take a few moments to think about that and to breathe. And let us now rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn. It is hymn number 175 in the Grey Hymnal. We celebrate the web of life. That is number 175.